Introduction to Philosophy, Lecture 10. Our text gives us another welcome break from the dense philosophical texts we've been analyzing. Similar to the last bit of fiction we read, entitled This Above All, this reading also gets its title from the advice of Polonius in Hamlet. Polonius tells his son, "Those friends thou hast, their adoption tried, grapple them to thy soul with hoops of steel." Hence the name of this reading about the human soul, Hoops of Steel. This short story follows Doctors Rene Carter and David Hughes, both named in homage to Rene Descartes and David Hume, who are attempting to recreate a study published in 1907 by Duncan McDougall, which purported to prove the existence of the soul. McDougall concluded that the human soul weighs 21 grams, the amount of weight patients lost upon death. However, the results were controversial. Throughout their discussions, the characters reveal that they have more in common with their namesake philosophers and often voice Cartesian and Humean sentiments. For example, Hughes criticizes Carter for her groundless mystical beliefs, which sounds similar to Hume's critiques of Descartes. Their discussions cover a wide range of related topics, such as the existence of the soul, the nature of scientific proof, and the role of beliefs in scientific inquiries. For example, when challenged by Hughes, Carter insists that their experiment can only support her metaphysical beliefs since, if there is a loss of 21 grams that cannot be accounted for by some other type of material loss, then what is left to explain it other than the evacuation of the soul? Contrarily, if there is no measurable loss in weight, then she is no worse off in her beliefs than she was before the experiment. Depending on your view of scientific methods, Carter's claim might be troubling for you. For example, recall our discussion of Karl Popper's falsifiability. Popper maintained that the only proper business of science is disproving hypotheses, and experiments that can only prove hypotheses true are typically mere pseudoscience. However, after a brief discussion speculating about the nature of the soul and how McDougall's questionable findings found their way into popular culture and even into people's personal beliefs, Hughes raises some practical and some theoretical questions about the current experimental procedures. Hughes asks, when exactly will we declare someone dead? Are we allowed to look at the loss of mass after the death of the physical body in patients that are already brain dead? Or are we to assume their souls are already gone? These last two questions have some interesting implications. For example, if someone is brain dead but kept alive using life support systems, do they still have a soul? Or are the soul and the mind two different things? Carter and Hughes jokingly entertain the idea, though seemingly impossible, of coming back from brain death and continuing life without a soul, but still carrying on, thinking and living as though there were no difference. What would this mean for the relationship between the soul and identity? If someone dies and the soul leaves their body, but then they are brought back to life, does this person just lose 21 grams of weight and go about their business with no impact on their personal identity? There are many epistemological and metaphysical questions raised in this story, both implicitly and explicitly. For example, consider the implicit epistemological questions. How can we know we have a soul? Is this a question we can answer using scientific methods? Or the metaphysical questions. What is a soul? Does it exist? What is the relationship between the mind, the soul, the body? And what do these relationships mean for our personal identity? Though philosophizing about the soul feels antiquated these days, depending on your beliefs, you may be surprised to learn that, in some senses, this is still a living topic of discussion. Different systems of beliefs, such as the religions of the Abrahamic tradition, are often still interested in these types of questions. Practices that merge ancient traditions with new wave ideologies such as yoga, astrology, and even different types of divination will often endorse a dualistic view of mind and body or soul and body, and others will endorse a triadic conception of mind, body, and soul. However, it's difficult to tell if any of these traditions are using dualism or triadism metaphorically. Another way in which this is still a living topic, even academically, can be seen in disciplines such as cognitive science and psychology, though these conceptions aren't typically dualistic in the Cartesian or spiritual sense. For example, psychology derives its name from the Greek word for soul, psyche, and the second half of the word is derived from the word for study, logia. If you research the history of psychology, you will see from the ancient Greeks to the present, there has always been a conception of the psyche, mind, or soul, though, with theoretical refinement, changes in terminology are almost inevitable. In the end, I'd say this reading gave us a much needed break from Descartes and Hume, but it still kept us on topic and left us with some very interesting food for thought.